this meeting to order. Good morning and thank you everybody for being here. We do have a number of delegations to present or speak to their items. So as I already discussed earlier, we will ask them to come to the table as we get to each order of business. We've done a visual roll call. We will not have Director Newell or Director Watson today. Neither of them are available. We noted that neither Director Graham or David Off are logged in yet, but we have
David Off is there.
He's there now? Okay, so we have one more member expected to log in during the meeting. We'll just take note, and Christine will indicate when she joins us. So, going to the agenda, we acknowledge and respect the Indigenous peoples within whose traditional lands we're meeting today. On adoption of the agenda, I would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as circulated. Cunningham, Weatherhead, anything from staff? I haven't heard of any additions or changes. All in favor? Is carried. Thank you. Receipt of minutes. There was a note after the fact that there was a file number that was not correct in the August 14th minutes. We don't have to adopt to change anything to do with it. Just understand that there is a revision to that set of minutes that will go to board tomorrow along with the minutes from this meeting today. Delegations, we do have delegations, I understand, from items 7.3, 7.4, and 7.5. And I also see Ms. Wingy and Anitra is online as well, so we may have 4 delegations on each of those items. So we will then go to 7.1, planning and building bylaw contravention, Piccolo. This is electoral area H. This has been referred from the August 14th Rural Affairs Committee meeting to today. And staff recommendation is to place a notice on title. Just looking for who we have for staff. Do we have a staff update? Has anything changed on this file?
Nothing has changed.
Okay, no new information. Recommendation is still file notice. We don't have a delegation for it. We have discussion or recommendation. Director Bob.
I will move the recommendation.
The recommendation by notice.
Described in the recommendation.
Second paragraph, discussion. We've gone through this in previous meetings, seeing no discussion. All in favor of the recommendation? Any opposed? So seeing none, that's carried, and that'll go to board tomorrow. I want to note, I see Director Page has joined us, City of Nelson representative. Could I entertain a motion to offer freedom of the floor? Pendergraft, seconded, Tierney. All in favor? So we'll welcome your input. Thanks for being here, people. Yeah. 7.2, building bylaw contravention, Wingy. This is Slocan West Road in area H. There is a recommendation to file notice on title. And we, as I said, you do have, Ms. Wingy is online. Did you want to speak and provide any additional information? The floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and to the members of the committee. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So through the Chair, thank you for the opportunity to briefly present. I did submit a letter which is on your agenda, which I'm hoping that you all had a chance to read, explaining the history and the current status of the project. I'm not going to go through the letter because, again, you've had a chance to read that, but I would like to briefly explain why I am asking for a notice on title, which I understand is probably quite unusual to have the landowner ask for that. So since being issued a building permit, I've worked with building department to ensure that I come into compliance with the BC Building Code and RDCK bylaws. I have to admit I was a bit alarmed initially when I was told in writing, and I have that email by a member of the planning or building department, that if I wanted to keep my house, it is not a house, that I would have to meet 3 conditions. I did meet those conditions, but what was disturbing to me was that demolition would be offered as the option. At no point during this process was notice on title given as an option. The RDCK has asked me to conform to the zoning. As you all know, there is no zoning in Area H. I've been asked to place a carbon monoxide detector in the tiny structure. There are no gas burning or gas powered or wood burning appliances. Ergo, I'm not actually required under the code to have a carbon monoxide detector in this. Also because there is no bedroom. These are.
Oh, sorry, Anitra, we lost your volume.
Oh,
Not sure. There, you're back now.
I'm sorry.
You're cutting in and out a bit. Maybe you need to be close enough to your microphone.
Okay,
Sure.
I'll come closer. Thank you.
Okay.
So the RDCK has continually asserted that I have a bedroom in this space, but yet it's a loft. They keep saying that it's a loft and that I have to have either metal or wooden sign saying that that upper space is only to be used for a loft. It is not a bedroom, so there's some contradiction there. The 140 square foot building was built initially as a playhouse for our niece. She's living in New Brunswick, so she won't be able to use it very often. But it is the only facility on our property that we have to use a washroom. And my husband and I are developing our property with the intention of retiring there. We're both writers, and it's a place for us to use the washroom and have a retreat when we are out in the Slocan. And we try to get out there often, but admittedly, we don't use this little building very often. Again, the RDCK keeps calling it a dwelling. It's 140 square feet. It's a seasonal building. We only access it from the spring until the fall. So yeah, again, in the code, the definition of dwelling is open to interpretation. Talk about sanitation facilities. There's no way to bathe or shower in this. It has a tiny sink and a toilet and a little tiny like motel kitchen thing where you can wash a dish, which I've never actually used. When the building inspector came out to look at the building, he told my father and I that everything should be golden because I do have an engineer's report. And 24 hours later, I was told that the building had failed all inspections. Some of the things were pointed out were that the they called it a dwelling, but our building had to be at least 98 feet set back from the river. It's actually 142 feet from the river. At no point did the inspector ask to take measurements. We actually had a tape measure we could have lent him. My father and I have used a transit and taken measurements based actually on the survey plan. That was the other issue.
Yes, you cut out again, Anitra.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's better now.
We're having tech problems over here, clearly. Sorry. So again, I was told that I couldn't prove that the building was on my property, despite the fact that we have, and the RDCK has a certificate from 1977, which clearly shows the iron pins, shows the measurements, all of the lots in West Slope.
Yeah, you've cut out again. Sorry.
So sorry about this. I don't know what's happening here.
Just a little closer seems to make the difference.
Okay,
sure.
I'll lean right in here. So I was told I needed a new survey. I got a quotation. It would be $8,000 to survey my property. I'm not going to do that. I have a survey plan from 1977. Was told that the RDCK couldn't read it. My colleagues can read it. I can read it. And I think that the RDCK should be able to overlay their GIS mapping against that survey plan and clearly indicate to see where my property is. This building is almost 24 feet from the fence line. So again, and there's no zoning, but I'm quite far from the fence line. The other thing is, I do have an engineer's report saying that the building is structurally perfect. In fact, the building exceeds the building code in many instances. A Slocan resident who was an architect and a contractor in the Eastern U.S. Has said it is a work of art. and a seasoned building inspector who is still a building inspector and was a contractor for many, many years, has called this a meticulously crafted building. I'm confident, my husband is confident, the engineer is confident that this building poses no threat to us. I would like to absolve the RDCK of any responsibility by placing a notice on title, and that's why I'm here today. And lastly, I'd like to thank my director, Director Walter Popoff, for his unwavering understanding and support around this issue. Thank you.
Thank you for that background. I've noted Director Main has joined us, but until we complete this delegation, we won't move to freedom of floor, but we will do that prior to putting a recommendation on the floor. So at this point, I guess we have staff as well as, of course, the applicant, the landowner here. Are there any questions for the delegate from the committee? Or staff, any additional input while we still have the delegate available in case there's questions?
Sure. Through the chair, I just want to say we have adjusted our procedure for notifying those that have approved or agreed to recommend the notice on title. And that now they will be notified as well, continuing on. From now on, they'll be notified of coming invited to these meetings. Some things that I noted in that are noted in the report that was sent to all of you was that initially this building was built without a permit, and that is what kind of started the whole situation. And the building is occupied. So under the floodplain bylaw, it has to meet a flood construction level. And that is the reason why we asked for the survey. There's no way for us as staff to know what the flood construction level is without a survey. So that's why we asked for a survey. Yeah, and we've given the opportunity to comply, and then we've just got the recommendation to the request to put it on title. So.
Fair enough. And really what I was looking for, if there's any more questions or anything that might lead to a question with the delegate. So I'll go back to Anitra. Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to point out that the procedure that the RDCK may have had is moot because initially the RDCK did not meet its statutory obligations. Under the community charter, landowners have to be invited to the meeting, and that did not occur. So I did make RDCK staff aware of that, that of course statute supersedes policy. So I'm glad to hear that the RDCK is changing that policy. I would have to correct Ms. Hopkins. The dwelling, as I call it, is not occupied. Again, I own the property. My parents are over there every day. They would see if someone were living in there. I can swear on a Bible, it is not occupied. In the last month, I've probably, now of course there were wildfires, so we were evacuated and my property was in severe threat from the fires. Last Saturday I was out there, I didn't even go into the tiny dwelling. So when they say it's occupied, there's no human occupation in there except for when we go out and use the bathroom, as I've stated. Initially, I admit, mea culpa, as I've explained in my letter, that we had started construction. Initially thought it was 100 square foot footprint that we didn't need a permit. Once issued a stop work permit by Dan Semenoff, I immediately called the RDCK. Never received a response from the RDCK until I finally called the general building department, and then immediately applied for a building permit. And since then, I've been working diligently to come into compliance. Again, I do not know why you would need a survey certificate because it very clearly shows my property. I was asked by Donna Carmichael about the floodplain, and you'll see in my letter, she quoted some number, and I said, I don't understand what that means. Never got a response. So I have been told by an engineer who surveyed and certified and was IH approved, my septic, that there is a tongue of land. My property is unusual on that side of the river because the elevation is higher. And so this tiny building is behind that. And in the 77 years that my mother has lived in Slocan, never once has the water breached that area. So I asked for clarification on that, never received any. And I'm not sure, again, why I would need a survey certificate when there is already one that clearly shows the boundaries of my property.
Well, thank you. And I do appreciate your focus on notification. If you'd sat in agenda prep meetings with me in the last few years, or if you go back a decade or so as well, it needs to be crystal clear that every landowner understands exactly when we'll be talking about impactful measures which may occur that will affect their use and enjoyment of land. So that has been sharpened up. And beyond that, I wasn't really looking to go back forth too much on what's been indicated as the understanding, but I was really looking for any other questions. I do see Director Cunningham, you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. Anitra, my question is the building insurable or is it insured?
I honestly, through the chair to director, I think it will be because it has an engineer's report. Honestly, I was waiting to get it insured until I was granted final occupancy by the RDCK. But now that that won't happen, I'll be approaching my insurer. Now, of course, because we've had wildfires, I have intel that they probably won't offer insurance probably until the winter. But yeah, I don't see why it wouldn't. It's been built. It's actually fire smarted. For the most part, it's got 24 gauge metal siding and a roof, and cement, basically sonotubes that again exceed code. So it's fire smarted as much as I can. I also have wasp sprinklers. So
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
welcome.
Any other questions for the landowner? Not seeing any then. Thanks, Anitra, for providing additional background and your perspective. If you wouldn't mind muting now, we will go to the business side of the item. Just before looking for a recommendation or further discussion, just before that, could we have a motion to grant freedom of the floor to Director Main? I see first, seconded, all in favor. So again, welcome, Leah. Good to have you keeping abreast of our activities. And so we'll go to the staff recommendation is to place a file notice on title. Discussion or does somebody want to move a recommendation? Director Popoff.
Yeah, I will move the recommendation and if seconded, I would like to say a few words.
I see a second. Hannegraaff, go ahead.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's very unfortunate that the back and forth between the regional district and the landowner, and it's been long dragged out. I've read all the information. I've talked to Ms. Wingy about the property, etc. I'm quite familiar where the property is. But I've also read the engineering report, and since the owner of the property is prepared to sign the release of liability to the regional district, I'm prepared to recommend approval.
Okay. Further discussion on the recommendation? Seeing none, all in favor? Oh, sorry, was that a question? Director
Yes, just for
Vandenberg.
clarity,
Director Vandenberg. Right, vote.
the approval that we're talking about is the direction to file notice on title.
Yeah, which would go to board tomorrow. We're recommending
Okay.
to board. Yes. Okay, that was it. No further discussion. All in favor? Any opposed? So thank you, everybody. That will go to board tomorrow. Next item is 7.3. It's a development variance permit application McGinn. This is electoral area B. We have Janice and Gregory McGinn as applicants. If you wanted to sit at the end of the table here, there were two recommendations with this arising from this application. The one is issuance of the development variance permit on the location of the building, and the second one is that staff does not recommend supporting is a change in the gross floor area of the structure. Welcome. We have reports from staff. We've seen advisory, heritage, and planning committee reports and the agriculture advisory committee reports. But anything else you want to add or information you think is relevant or if not, we would perhaps have questions for you. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on about the variances that are being requested. And it just came to our attention after we saw the RDCK's report of August 12th that there was more information regarding the no agricultural rationale was supplied to justify an increase in the maximum gross floor area of the proposed residence. And that we had only indicated that we will plant a small portion of the subject property. So just wanted to give you information on those. So we are a multi-generational family. There's 3 generations that are we're hoping to live on the property. We purchased the property 2 years ago with our dream of ranching and farming on this property, and we are a ranching and farming family. So the property was originally a recreational property. It was a golf course that we are repurposing back into agricultural land. So the back half of the property, approximately 5 acres, we have turned into horse pasture, cross-fenced it. Our granddaughter and daughter are raising quarter horses, and my granddaughter trains them. And we are repurposing the greens into arenas and areas where she can pursue her dream of training and horses and raising them. Our other repurposing of the golf course is the gardening aspect of it. And I just wanted to touch on that a bit. And it's not really a small area of gardening that we are planting. And in the 2 years that we've had the property, we've managed to repurpose the number 5 green into a garden area that has been quite successful in our first year of planting. And our second area of planting in between the 2 creeks that are on the property is also making tremendous gains, and we will be planting it this fall for our garlic harvest next year. So it's not small by any means. And then sort of 3 phases. So the horse, the husbandry, we also have goats. We're planning on adding chickens and pigs to our farm as well, and cows as well. And then the second phase is kind of the gardening phase, and the third phase is the building and maintenance that we're doing on the property to the existing building that was there was originally an abattoir, and then used for the golf course as a maintenance building, which we're now repurposing back into farming. It has 2 walk-in coolers that are in it. So we've been working on that building as we await our building permit. My husband will expand on.
And as for the other variants, to the house size, I must apologize that I was not aware of restrictions in that. That if I would have known, I would have designed the house to be 300 square meters. But 300 square meters under one roof is a lot bigger than what we have proposed here. Being a multi-generational family, I think we need to have that space. There was part of it was to be a crawl space, but that changed in the excavation process. Got dug out, and well, we're 23 square meters over. The allowable space And that's taking in both floors. So it is a 1,700 square foot bungalow with a walkout basement. But as far as the agricultural planning objectives, page 8, I believe that we are on board for that and in agreement with agricultural land. But, taking a recreational piece of property, turning it back into agriculture is our purpose.
Great, thank you. And just to clarify the comment you made, and it's a little ironic when you said under one roof, you could have 300 square meters as a rancher taking up 300 square meter footprint. We're going to have 300 square meter on a 3 or 4 story in the hillside taking up far less. So appreciate that.
Yeah, it is talking about a footprint.
So are there questions from the committee to the delegation and or clarifications needed from staff over, say there's 2 recommendations. One, staff is recommending support the variance for the location. The other one is the issue of the size of the building.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. To the Chair, to the applicant here, it says 323 square meters, and I really didn't understand when you said it's only 300 meters or being reduced to 300. Is it still 323 meters? Square.
Yes, taking in both floors.
Oh,
However, they are talking about a footprint, and that's not a footprint.
okay, thank you.
Other questions? Go ahead, Director Hanegraaff.
So what is footprint?
The footprint is the size of the foundation.
Yeah, no, I mean, how big is the footprint?
1,700,
What the footprint is.
1,720 roughly.
Or a city, I guess, if you want to elaborate on
Yeah.
how the bylaw reads.
Oh, right.
Sure.
The applicants are correct, the footprint is the 1,700, give or take. But the specific regulations in the bylaw are the gross floor area. So that's the total of the stories combined, and that's why they're seeking variances, they're going over in that.
And footprint is important in terms of impacting the total area. It's 3.5 hectares here. The idea of the square footage gross total area is you don't have you can put a small tower there, and the cost of that would make it prohibitive for someone else to be able to afford to buy and farm. This is the dilemma. This is again a little bit of opinion of the discussion here, where we kind of had to establish a benchmark where we said, where are we creating massive mansions on farmland that are no longer affordable for anybody but those within a certain economic sector, versus keeping the total price, which is impacted by the total size of the house, down to something that in the future would maybe encourage farming over just sitting and living there. And apologize if that sounds like too much editorialization, but it has been a big conversation in the Crescent Valley. Director Weatherhead.
Thank you, through the chair to staff. Is there a rationale in terms of this being resurrected from golf course back into ALR? Does the ALC, I guess you can't decide on how they think or gauge these things, but does that get factored in?
It's definitely something that gets thought about, but I think when we come back to the bylaw, it's pretty clear that regardless of the property, 100%, it's lovely that they're going to establish an agricultural operation, or that they, have that planned in agricultural business. But just in terms of our bylaw, when they look at saying, hey, are we going to allow a little bit more? Because the bylaw currently allows an additional 90 square meter farm worker dwelling unit. So there is if there was an agricultural business operating, there would be a rationale for that extra square footage on the lot. But because it's just planned, that's where, the bylaw wouldn't necessarily support it. Whereas if we came back in 3 years with the operation, I think there would be a stronger rationale to support. And that was consistent also with the Ministry of Agriculture's recommendation.
Further, Director?
No, thank you.
Director Vandenberg.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. We looked at this property way back when. I'm quite familiar with it. I've walked around it a number of times. It's a great little gem of an opportunity to see that it's moving from a failed par 3 into an agricultural use is quite notable, and I think is great. Multi-generational when it comes to agriculture, I think we're going to see more and more of it because that's what it's going to take to operate some of these agricultural operations. It's not the first recommendation. It's the second one that I key in on. I mean, we're talking about a 1,700 square foot home. Yes, it's 2 floors, but really we're talking about 125 square feet more as an oops, I guess, in your original design per floor. I don't think that's detrimental. Our staff is bound by the bylaws and zoning that is approved to them. So they're doing their job. And, but of course, it's our view and recommendations that based on what we hear and see that come before us that allow us to give us that opportunity to weigh in and to approve or disapprove. So I'm in support of the second motion or the second recommendation. Because I think that
So we're moving a little bit into the deliberation on the recommendation, but your clarification as to staff's responsibility is really well appreciated, Director.
Yeah. And
Any additional questions for the applicants or clarification? Okay, not seeing anyone, and not online either. Thanks very much. That information is useful. And if you would mind stepping back to the gallery, we will look to the 2 recommendations. And I think the easiest way is one at a time. If, of course, Director Tierney, it's your area. We were open to discussion, move one or the other recommendations, but Director Tierney, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I'd like to move option 2 and speak to it if I may.
There's 2 recommendations on the agenda. If you would just move one and then the other. So are you moving now, like if there's one recommendation to approve the variance in terms of the...
Yeah, I apologize. I think option 2, I thought addressed both.
So if we move that as a block, we go in a circle. So, and I would call for division. And so without doing that, what I'm asking is move one of them, please. And
There's an option 2 in the report, which is what he's talking about.
yes, but if we move, okay, let me go just to be clear. If we go to, is that both recommendations under option 2?
Yeah.
Option 1 has 2 parts.
So then if there's 2 recommendations, I'd rather we divide them. So if you, is option 2, I'm not on the right page right now. So option 2, both recommendations to both support. If that's what you move, do we have a second to move both recommendations to support both? I see a second. We'll do it by the process. I'm going to call for division. So to be simplified. Director Cunningham.
Thank you. My printing here, this option 1 says the board approved, and it also says right under the board not approved.
There's 2 recommendations.
So there's 2 recommendations, option 1, either approve or not approve. Before we move into option 2, is that what it is?
Hold on, just let me get to the right page, because this is unproductive, and we will divide these. So, page 45, 43, 44.
Mine is page 45.
45.
Yeah. This is page
Option
41. Bottom here.
There's 2, option 2. The board approved issuance for the gross floor area. So what you're doing is you want to move the second recommendation on its own. That is the development variance permit to recommend we approve that DVP to go from 300 square meters and combined with the lot line as a single recommendation.
My apologies.
That's fine. We can move that if you want.
In reading the recommendations, I thought option 2 referred to approval of both.
Yep, and we can certainly do that. I'm just not sure if that is as efficient, but absolutely moved and seconded. I'll be silent. The recommendation is that the board approve both the development variance permit for the shifting allow a farm residential footprint with a maximum depth of 151 meters, and that permit the dwelling with a maximum gross floor area of 323 square meters. So I'll leave it at that. So that's discussion on that recommendation with both items being approved as one recommendation. Discussion, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to staff. It's been a bit of a difficult one. I think you've done a great job. Now, we've heard several points in regards to the property being converted from a recreational property to an agricultural property. These are the things that I think support option 2, the fact that it is being converted to agricultural property again. And there really is a succession happening on this property. The younger generation, they've provided 2 separate living spaces in the house to accommodate the next generation that take over. The applicants are moving along in age, similar to my age, and important to plan for that succession. I understand the square footage is to avoid building large mansion type homes, which is happening in the area. I don't believe this is a home design that is over the top in size and style. It's a very practical design, and the footprint is quite a bit less than 3,000 square meters, or 300 square meters, sorry. So I do support this, and would like to see the applicants given the opportunity to complete their plan. Thank you, Eric. And the one other thing I'd like to point out is that both the APHC Commission and the Crescent Valley Ag Commission weighed in on the square footage, and both gave their approval and convinced me that in this case it was justified. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Popoff.
Yeah, a question to the chair, and you might want to elaborate on this, is by moving option 2, we're looking at 2 different situations. And the last situation, by recommending approval of the increase in the footprint size or whatever, could that be reversed by the ALC?
No.
Okay, that answers my question.
Thank you, and that is a good point, because that's what I'm concerned about, if there's any next step where we might get tripped up. This will be a single variance.
Yeah.
That's permissible. Further discussion on the recommendation? Seeing none, not online, Director Daybrow. All in favor? Any opposed? So thank you for coming in. That will go to the board tomorrow as a single variance recommendation. Thank you. Next item is 7.4 is another development variance permit. This is A on McPhee Road, electoral area J. We have a delegation here, Beryl and Lauren. David. We have the delegates, the landowners here.
Yeah, we're busy talking about it.
Yep.
Burl,
We'll just
you're up.
Discussing strategy.
I was just interested where a golf course goes down, right?
pitch and putt or something, it sounds like. There's a single recommendation on the agenda that is to approve the development variance permit as listed here, respecting building containers, building height, and maximum gross floor area. So we have a report. I also understand there's a note here from Christine that you wanted to speak to a bit of a presentation, which she has loaded.
As I said, a picture is 1,000 words, right?
Absolutely. So the floor is yours.
So what our PowerPoint is pictures.
Okay, please go ahead.
But right off the bat, Christine, do you want to flip to the next screen, please? Thank you. Your plan is over 30 years old. Now, before I was putting this together, I was paying some bills on the webpage for 50 savings. So I'm thinking, 30 years ago, what did you do? You had to pay those into the credit union or bank and pay those. You think in 30 years, what has changed? This is a business plan. What business do you know that has a 30-year-old plan? They'd be bankrupt. I guess the one that comes to mind is Sears. Why Sears is no longer around. Anyways, going forward, I just wanted to touch base on that, is that what we're looking at, it needs help. Christine, please. So we have a panhandle property. So this is our driveway looking down at our house. Our house is down the very end. You can see our new build of the carport is going on. The proposed garage is where the large tree is behind there. There's actually 2 shipping containers there. You cannot see them. Christine? So going up into we're at the 1200 block, going into the 1300 block, this is between 2 properties where you can actually see where the proposed building is. I have highlighted it with a red circle. So that's what our neighbors would be seeing. Next, please. Degrading, one more back, please. There we are. Oh, back again, please. Sorry. Okay. So this is on the other side of the property. Again, it's pretty obscured. I'm sneaking between 2 pieces of property, trying to get a picture of where our proposed building will be. And next, please. So everybody keeps coming to us, why this size? Why this size? Well, there's many reasons actually. One, we are on a mobile. Mobiles do not have basements. If you have a basement, think of all your crap. And that's your seasonal, your Christmas, your Halloween. Again, even the gardening stuff, it has to have a place to live during our seasons. So that alone is part of it. In addition to that, we have, my husband has an extensive tool collection. And when we moved, we discovered that he could open a tool shop and I could open a craft store, but that's a separate little note. We also are trying to set ourselves up for retirement. That's why we downgraded to this property. And we want to purchase an RV. The RVs that we're looking at is a Class A that are usually between 36 and 40 feet long with slides on both sides. If you take that into consideration square feet, that's about 440 square feet alone. That is going to be going in that building. So the floor plan, it consists of a container on each side, this going in the center, and of course, we also have snow removal with our long driveway. We're not shoveling that by hand. We have a snowplow that is not insured because it never leaves the property. So that is also a next slide, please. So let's take a look around our neighborhood and see what you've approved for variances. Okay? So we're at 1298. This is just down the street at 13, I can't quite read the number, 43, I believe. Mr. Henny's property. So, or not Henny, sorry. Henny, I'm looking at you and saying, anyway, so this property here, this is the roadway, this is McFeever. This garage is like right front and center from all to see. This was approved by variance. Next, please. The next road I want to say is Hillview Road, which is on the other side of the highway, but still well within our, what I would call neighborhood. There was several. one, you can see this one large building, and they just kept going with more additional, because they just plain out of the space on the first picture there. The picture on the right is, you can see clearly a fifth wheel. Now that fifth wheel, from experience, we can tell you that is about 12.5 feet tall. So that building behind it is definitely a variance construction. Next picture. The last one in Hillview is this one here. Now, I would classify this as commercial. I don't know what all happened here, but we're familiar. My husband wasn't logging, so we're quite familiar with the whole scenario here. But that clearly is a variance of sorts. I'm not quite sure if it fell in the commercial spot, but nevertheless, it's just part of our community. And we're just asking to be treated as you have treated with these folks, taking a look at the variance. This is the floor plan that we're looking at. Again, you can see that the containers are incorporated in with an add-on up front to allow us to get the RV into place, and of course, the storage of the additional equipment needed. Yes.
Okay. Is that the end of your presentation?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so questions, maybe just before taking that question, and Director Cunningham and Popoff would probably recall, at one point we had a little chart of variances in this area, and I think it was 11 sticks in my mind. Anyway, so it's an interesting point you raised. Questions for the delegation and or clarifications from staff. Director Cunningham, please go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I have a question. About turning CCAS into livable spaces. I have seen it done. Is that possible to incorporate within a regular? You have to jack them up and put them on the foundation. I'd like a little bit more information as to exactly how you utilize this thing.
These are storage spaces, aren't
There are
they?
storage spaces. The one on the right-hand side is our household storage space, because we don't have a crawl space or basement. We keep our personal stuff in there for the household. The other one on the left-hand side is my tool storage. It would be jacked up and the foundation installed underneath on both ends for the support.
Great. I don't know if Zach would want to, like, this is not a residential application in any
It's
respect.
not a residential application. It's strictly storage.
Further, Director Cunningham?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Other questions for the applicant? Director Popoff.
Yeah, just, I'm not too sure. I see the staff recommendation is to approve, and we have a delegation here. Is staff approving something different than what you've asked for?
No.
Well, sure, let's go to Zach and then Director Hanegraaff, if you have something else to add, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so to clarify staff's recommendation on this application, we are recommending support or approval for the height and the allowance to have shipping containers on the property. But based on the fact that the size of the structure goes against the policies in the official community plan and is substantially larger than the 100 square meters that is permitted in the zoning bylaw, we are recommending not support for the 183 square meters, but option one in my report does reflect that we could support 150 square meters, which is consistent with the policies in the official community plan for areas high in shape.
And Director Hanegraaff, did you have a question or
I
comment?
have a question. The delegation, I'm very familiar with the property in question. I used to live 3 doors down.
Okay, that's a rock band, isn't it? 3 doors down. That's it for my bad humor of the day. So further questions for the delegation? Seeing none, thank you very much. Director Vandenberg, go ahead.
Yes, just wondering, in the report, it talks about comments from the RCK Fire Services, and
I don't think it was Reno, just I thought it was Nelson.
The Nelson.
so it's RCK Fire Services in the report. And so they're commenting on utilizing shipping containers as a permanent fixture in new construction. Are you actually constructing something new? And I guess that it makes that confusing for me as to, I'm not quite clear as to what your intention is. 2 shipping containers, putting a roof over it, perhaps, I'm not quite sure. But based on what I'm reading from the fire services, they're saying permanent fixtures in new construction. Is that accurate?
Well, it is a new.
It is a new construction, yes.
Yeah, they currently exist right now on the property for the shipping containers. And there is a temporary roof, because we've been working on this for years. This is our 3rd year, actually, working on this, trying to come to something to get together and to come to a conclusion so we can continue on building a permanent structure. Does that answer your question?
Kind of, but not really, because he
Did you see that?
refers to, in terms of safety, ensuring that they're properly ventilated. I have containers as well. I know exactly what he's talking about. But on the other hand, the concern around metal containers, shipping containers, being converted to residence, we're seeing it everywhere now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's no different than a concrete tilt-up building versus a metal building. But that safety precaution of ventilation, no matter how you use it, you should, in my mind, that's an important piece in this. But it's confusing because I'm not quite clear what you're trying to do. And then I'll wait for the director of that area to fill in the missing blanks. I would hope.
Could you put the floor plan,
That's not necessary.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, question from Director Weatherhead.
Thank you through the chair to, whomever actually. These shipping containers, from what I'm seeing, are going to become part of an interior as opposed to an exterior. Does that actually, through staff, does that change anything when it comes to what Director Vandenberg is noting about ventilation? Because now they're not going to be sitting outside and getting that hot and cold per se, unless there's still on an exterior wall from the outside.
Through the chair, I think we're kind of delving into a little bit more territory of what the building department and what the building code would consider. I think what Director Vandenberg was saying is that there are inherent risks associated with storing certain types of things in shipping containers because they are essentially sealed boxes. There is no ventilation. So there would be consideration, through the building permit process in terms of how to do that safely. And typically engineers and architects are required whenever shipping containers are incorporated into structures because it's not something that falls within the parameters of the BC building code. So it would be reliance on professionals in this case. It's out of my wheelhouse in terms of further details of the building code.
So it falls outside of Part 9 of the code, which is what our building inspectors are trained to focus on versus Part 4, Part 3. That's good. For the second time, Director Cunningham.
Yes, thank
Go
you.
ahead.
I was looking at the pictures and recently the fire department obtained a shipping container because we're not allowed to store fuel in the fire hall. And we have a snow blower, which we store in the shipping container. And the building department said that we should put in ventilation, and indeed we did. We had to have intake ventilation, but rooftop ventilation, so there's constant flow through the shipping container to avoid any accumulation of fumes. And I think that, I understand, I've heard that you plan on using a tool shed and things like that.
I have all of my power equipment and gasoline and oil storage in a separate shed. They don't go in the shop area or containers.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the delegation? Seeing none, thanks very much. That's always useful to hear more details on what's going. PowerPoint is a little bit, so that's top notch. So we will now go to, there's a recommendation from staff with numbers, which Zach has pointed out, the difference between what the applicants initially were seeking and what staff is recommending. There are no other substantive differences that you're aware of, Zach? Just that area of the gross footprint of the building. Questions, recommendations, open the floor up, Director Hanegraaff.
Yeah, so, the only thing that's really in question here is the maximum, square footage, and I think we're 33 square meters apart, between what the applicants are requesting and what, the building department, or sorry, the planning department is, saying is, what they recommend. You know, and to be clear, these guys are friends of mine. I live down the road from them. Not that that affects my decision in any way.
Yeah, just caution, of course, if there's ever an appearance or perception of conflict of interest, the person would recuse themselves. But what your statement is, this is objective, please carry on.
Yeah, and it really, the friendship does not hinge on this decision, I'll say that. And I have talked to them as their area director and have said, you know, if you were trying to break new ground here, I would have a different view of this. But given, and they were only within Udashenia with the pictures they showed you, the one on McPhee Road, which I used to live on McPhee Road, to be clear. It's huge. It's practically sitting on the road. You can't miss it. This is very discreet compared to that. The difference is much less compared to that. And there are examples all over Area J where shop or storage space exceeds the 150 square meters. And so given that our OCP hasn't been updated in 30 years, and so this is why we have so many variances, I believe, coming out of Area J, because we have an outdated plan that doesn't reflect what the community wants. So given all of that, I would like to amend the recommendation to the 183 square meters.
So there's nothing on the floor right now, so you can move the recommendation with under bullet 3, the gross floor area of 183 square meters. You're moving as
I kind of did it backwards, but anyway.
So you moved that. We have a second for that recommendation, Vandenberg. So discussion. Director Vandenberg.
This is to me, this is innovative thinking, utilizing with what we have going on in our society today. Have no problem with this, and even the additional square meterage, which it's funny you tell my age because I have to convert square meters to square feet. And we're talking about an additional. The motion is asking for additional 355 square feet. For those of you who still think in square feet, you're welcome. And I have no issue with that at all, so I would be supporting you.
I don't see anyone else right away, so I'm going to ask a question, Zach. The total combined permissible under the current is 150. Historically, we've seen, and as I say, we saw a chart of how many variances were granted. Do you have in front of mind what those previous variances were, sort of order of magnitude, and is that where the 150 has come from? Has the 150 been a unique amendment to this bylaw in recent years, or has that 150 square meters been there for a long time? Seems to me it was relatively recent that that number was settled on.
Yeah, through the chair, I guess first I'd like to clarify there's maybe a little bit of confusion here in terms of what we're actually varying. Variances are to the zoning bylaw. The OCP sets the broad kind of objectives, policies for which the zoning is implemented under. But the variances are to the zoning bylaw, which restricts the maximum size of accessory buildings to 100 square meters. I quoted the OCP policy in the report and mentioned it because of the fact that, you know, we are kind of bound by the policies that we have in place, and decisions should be consistent with the land use policies in accordance with the Local Government Act. But back to your original question about some of the past decisions, maybe, I mean, those have ranged from one of the examples that they shared, the one that's close to the road is I believe 223 square meters. And then there's been a lot that are in the range of 100 to 150 square meters. I don't have the table handy, but I know that in the past reports, there was kind of a summary of past decisions that was provided to give context. But yeah, one piece that I just wanted to focus on in the report was the fact that, you know, the land use policy in the OCP does set that kind of higher level guidance for how we should be making decisions.
Thanks. Other question or other discussion on the recommendation is put forward with 183 square meters. Not seeing any, not seeing, oh, I see Director Graham, did you know? Welcome, Director Graham.
You joined at 9:04. Yeah.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I just back and forth, hadn't noted how long you'd been there. Always looking to see if there's anyone online with a question. No further discussion, or seeing none. All in favor of the recommendation as moved and seconded. Supported. Any opposed? So that recommendation will go to board tomorrow with those not with the 183. Thank you for coming and providing us your input. We will go to item 7.5, which is land use bylaw amendment. This is a Heartland Mennonite Brotherhood. This is electoral area C along Highway 3A, just north of Creston. We do have delegates here, Nelson Waddell and or Joe. If you want to come up to the table, welcome. This recommendation from staff is a no further action. Was this one was that as well? Great, thanks very much. So I guess initially any additional information you want to provide or answer questions at your discretion. Go ahead.
All right, well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for this time. Give a little bit of background here. I'd also like to thank Kelly Vandenberg, our local area director, and also Zach for his help in direction to get us to this point. Little background, we're just a small Christian group there in Creston with Mennonite roots. We believe in supporting and working with our local communities. We adhere to strong core values and believe in becoming assets in our community through outreach, helping the less fortunate, involving ourselves in local businesses, and building our community up. We made our initial move to Creston in 2013 after falling in love with the valley. And it's all varied, the varied parts of it. It's a beautiful place. Initially, we made contact with local realtors. Through that avenue, we attempted to purchase the Wendell School. That building and property were vacant at the time. Our local realtor that we were in contact with got that set up for us. It would have suited our needs well. We had plans to renovate and restore it. We made an offer, a quite decent offer on that property, which was substantially higher than the sale to whoever it actually took it then, which I think is a community association. It is now abandoned and neglected in disrepair. So moving on, we made a decision to, we just rented various venues around the Creston Valley, trying to find some footing. We found a small building in Erickson owned by the Duke Boards. We rented that. They, after a period of time, approached us to purchase it from them, which we gladly did, as it was at least something more permanent at that point that fit our needs right then. Several years later, started getting cramped for space. This building is literally 20 by 45. It's a tiny building on a tiny lot, sandwiched between houses in a residential neighborhood on back Erickson. So we made use of that, but we have definitely outgrown it. We're parking on the street. There's just not enough room for us there. So we moved on from that. In 2019, we bought a property on the north end of Creston with assurances that the infrastructure was accessible to us to rezone that 3-acre property to CES. I know this is not RDCA, this was Town of Creston. We were denied that rezoning application, even after we were assured that it was successful and feasible. We sold that property and purchased the property on Highway 3 that we're talking about today, 2702. We have spent considerable time and funds to get us to this point. And we do believe there's a path forward. We've done due diligence and researching other properties. We've kept realtors involved all through this process, trying to find other properties that have correct zoning. No success. So we have this property. We've owned it since 21, early 21. We purchased this knowing the current zoning was agricultural, but not ALR. We also, with some research from the neighborhood, there's a lot of exposed bedrock in the neighborhood. It's not considered farmable land in the area. No one else is farming there besides some goat pasture and some pigs. Very poor topsoil on hard pan clay. The seasonal runoff stream right through the middle of the property, cutting it in half. Though we would keep space open for our community that don't have acreages or maybe renting in town, that they can come out and garden on this property. We've engaged a local ROWP in Crescent to spearhead this full septic design and get it engineered. They have already completed perk tests, soil logs. We're just waiting on pulling the trigger on full design until a resolution has been made. We also pumped down the original water well, which was a fairly shallow well, found it to have insufficient flow. About a month ago, we put in a new 400-foot well, again, spending dollars to get us to this point. We were able to achieve 20 gallons per minute out of that well. We're still working with IHA on what they will require us to put in place permits and stuff on that well. A few final points. I said we've outgrown our existing building. Very true. We have 60 to 70 people in regular attendance. We're trying to cram them into a small building. We aren't looking to build any big splashy complex on this property. We just need something that suits our needs better than where we are now. We've since reduced the size of the proposed building site to retain as much green space as possible. As I said before, we spent substantial funds even in our search for a suitable property, and we are excited to proceed on this property, subject to your resolutions. There's 2 letters that are negative towards the rezoning application. The Powells have since, as of yesterday evening, retracted their negative letter. And Zachary, I believe, has a copy of their retraction. And their initial concern was the location of the septic field, but as we were discussing with our engineer, septic engineer in ROWP, we moved the septic field several hundred feet to the north, far away from any shallow wells. There's another negative letter from a different property owner in the neighborhood. I'm not going to say a lot about that one, other than with having a well-maintained, cleaned up property with lots of green space should not devalue their property whatsoever. It should in fact have the opposite effect on their property. In conclusion, we believe having a building suitable to our needs of the church community is vital to the well-being of our members and their families in the future, and make it viable for our church to remain a part of this local community and put our hearts into serving Crescent Valley to the best of our ability. Thank you for your consideration in this application.
Thank you for that background information, especially historical places you've looked for, locations for your church, for your development. Just in general, of course, there's a no further action option, and the other normal course of action would be moving 2 readings and public hearing. Questions for the delegation, I guess, to begin with, or if any clarifications needed from Zach? Any questions from the directors? Must be relatively straightforward, I guess. Again, thank you then, I guess. We will move on to the business part of the item if you wanted to return to the gallery. Thanks very much. So opening up for discussion or recommendations, as I said, unless Zach wanted to give any other recap, I'm not sure background. Or do you want to go to Director Vandenberg? Yeah, let's go to Director Vandenberg. Go ahead.
Thank you to the chair. I would like to make the recommendation. It is the option 2, being a bylaw to amend the comprehensive land use bylaw 2317, hereby giving reading first and second and then referring to public hearing.
So at board, you wouldn't move such a recommendation because you're named in the part of the recommendation.
Isn't that a tricky one?
So being in committee, knowing that's your wish, I will move recommendation option 2, which includes that, which should read, I guess, and further, that Director Vandenberg would be delegated authority to chair the public hearing. I'll move that recommendation on your behalf, so there's no question. Maybe do we have a second discussion on the recommendation? Director Vandenberg, the floor is yours.
Right. Had the privilege to work with this group and understand that they've done what they can do, and the core, the cultural values that this group offers, like any other organized community, is only good for the community. They've done their diligence. They're trying to find a place that they can continue to be vibrant within the community and then carry on. I'm glad that they reached out to me, and we had conversations around the workings. And I believe that this is, when I look in the area that they're in, it's accurately described. It's a bedrock area. Yes, you can put some topsoil on and grow. Well, you won't be able to get carrots growing, I don't think, but a lot of other things in that area. I think it's well suited, and I'm happy to support it. So to support their location of their facility.
No, we're supporting the public having the voice on this, as
And that's important too.
which the chair of a public hearing is unbiased and undecided until the public has spoken at the public hearing.
That's a very good point.
Further discussion or questions regarding the recommendation? Seeing none. All in favor with the option 2, public hearing? That will go to board tomorrow as well.
Chair, could I make a comment just after this motion? And
Yes, go ahead, Director Davidoff. We have completed the motion. Go ahead.
Yeah, I know sometimes directors get a lot of pressure. I know I have on certain applications. Well, what's your position? Particularly on contentious applications or potentially contentious applications. And once this kind of a motion, like I'm very careful about not saying anything if there's a possibility of it going to public hearing. And it really frustrates my constituents because they say, well, what's your position? Surely you can tell us I says, this matter's going to a public hearing. I am representing the whole board at that public hearing. I will not say what my position is, and what'll happen is when it gets to the board table, then I will voice where, what I support. But so it's a really good point, Chair, that you made, and I think we really need to be cognizant of when we're moving stuff to public hearing, that we are impartial and that we don't have a position.
Thank you, Director, for emphasizing that, because it's the voice of the community that always is what final recommendations are based on, and that's through the board. As a bit of a stray comment here, there's a lot of land in Creston that's underutilized. And at some point, sort of getting those numbers again, I know RDI has done a lot of work on that to try and identify community by community, what's left fallow and what is being used and how it's being used. And that's something I always hold in the back of my mind, looking at any individual parcel. But staff has done what they need to do as well. They have been mandated by us to protect, to preserve and promote the use of agricultural land, agricultural potential land. So that's the give and take that we face. The next item is not a little one. And we've bumped it along a little bit, and it's 10:14 on my machine here. So I think this is a good time to get up and have a bit of a stretch. If people are in agreement, take a bit of a break, and then we'll sit down and be ready for a few minutes of discussion on item 7.6. So what if we go till 10:25? We'll target that.
Didn't talk, didn't come together. But I
Okay, my computer says it's 25 past the hour. We will call the meeting back to order. If everybody can get back to their seats, please.
Okay.
So, next item is a large item. If you look at the report and the work plan and what all is going on, there may be a few things that we need to try and resolve here. Before doing that though, somebody pointed out that there's a municipal director who's been on this board for quite some time. In fact, is vice chair of the board. And I did entertain a motion to grant freedom of the floor to Director Lockwood.
I'll move that.
Director Hanegraaff, pop seconds. All in favor of that we allow our third municipal director who's been here for the entire meeting to weigh in as appropriate. My apologies. Can't see the forest for the trees.
Just a question on policy and procedure is in view of the absence of the chair was always part of this because she was a rural director or because she was chair?
Only because she's a rural director.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's in my mind has been, voting status and the like. That's where that has come from. The committee members of the service are the ones who would vote. Anyway, so on item 7.6, I guess the first thing, and as I understand it, this system we use that pops out these wonderful pieces of paper with shaded boxes and bullets and stuff, popped out something in the recommendation that's on the agenda in a different format than you'll see in the report. So just to note that in the recommendation, there's words, review report dated July 4th, 2024, which includes colon, and that should then jump to like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, the same as a report. So the first item, area I, O, C, P, belongs down below with a bullet point. The second item is housing needs, the third needs assessment, then the third one is a regional growth planning analysis. So if you're following Nelson's report, he's got it in here a couple times. That's what we're looking at. That will be how the staff recommendation, if we go with this recommendation, we'll look at more tomorrow. So it's just a little formatting error. The note says here. So the things we can do, staff are looking for a recommendation. Jump on this and not on that. Where do they need to go? Also, we could give either direction to staff or whatever strength of recommendation you want to put through board. It's what we're going to do for the next workshop. If we're going to do another workshop and when, or whether we're going to do 2 more workshops if we want to have another just kind of cluster of rural and expand it very formally out to including municipal directors, the full board, and then whether or not that workshop would, sometimes we pay stipend, that stuff I don't want to talk about today, but generally when we've invited municipal directors to come to rural committee, because it's meaningful and necessary for us to understand some stuff, we would also offer stipend and expenses. When it's the entire board that's impacted, that's something we haven't sorted out. So I don't want to talk about that kind of stuff today, but what I do want to talk about is whether or not we think we want another workshop similar to what we had earlier in the year, which we covered a lot of ground on, with designated as a rural workshop and or a combined workshop with the entire board. So however you feel about that, you may or may not decide on that today. So to remind us of all the work Nelson and the crew has been doing, he has kind of condensed down a little bit of a presentation, a recap. Maybe we'll start off with that and get our minds in here.
Do you prefer me at the podium or at the table?
Table seems, it's fine to see Zach or Corey or whoever say up at the podium, but it seems a little bit formal. We're not a city council.
Thank you, and Christine, if you could just land there for a couple minutes while I get started.
And did I miss a hand or chat? Let me sort of go back.
Have his hand up, but then took it down.
Yeah,
sure. Director Davidoff, please go ahead while Nelson's getting his stuff together. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask you if it would help for someone to move the motion that staff is recommending, or do you want staff to present first and then, because seeing area eyes right in number one, well, I was ready to move that motion.
We already have another recommendation from a director who, due to unavoidable circumstances, cannot be here. So I'd rather you not move, nobody moves a recommendation till we hear a little bit from staff, have a little bit of conversation, because there's a few ways of going about this. And it's not just isolated, of course, to area I, but thanks for your comment, Director David.
Yeah, just checking, Chair.
Okay, go ahead, Nelson.
Thank you, Chair. So just want to, before we dive into it, I just want to recap. There was a lot of material I provided in July, and I just want to remind ourselves of what those pieces are, because I think all of them are also critical to the discussion. So in the staff report I attached, there's the February workshop summary. Costing and timelines was another piece that we added subsequent to the workshop that looked at the status quo versus a harmonized approach. Reminding you of what that existing project list is and the description for each. And then another piece we put together was the policy alignment to illustrate how a lot of our OCPs have similar language. And that was a piece we did subsequent to the workshop. I also thought was useful. And then lastly, looking at OCP dates, which area had the last OCP updated and when that was. So today I'm just going to do a summary presentation. I might skip a bit faster than what I provided in the July one. And so we're going to look at the work that we are doing, how we've been doing that, maybe opportunities for doing it better, looking back at lessons learned, and then we'll land on the options piece, which next slide, Christine, is the two basic options, I guess, which is looking at the status quo and prioritizing the items, or we look at a workshop where we can do explore some of the other options through a harmonized approach. So to recap on the near-term projects, maybe just go to the next slide, Christine, and the Gantt chart, this just relists those ones that are in stream. So to recap, area IOCP nearing completion, housing needs assessment to be done by the end of the year, regional growth planning analysis, we're going to talk more about that, but that is launched. Local government housing initiatives, that refers to the follow-up work to the SMA, the small scale multi-unit, whatever the acronym is. This next piece, that next piece would look at the OCP amendments that are needed to ensure alignment. Subdivision servicing bylaw, flood hazard policy regs update, and our pretty typical planning procedures and fees bylaw review, which we do often once a year, sometimes more frequently than that. So that's the near-term list. And then next slide. What we then have to assess is how we tackle the remaining 10 items. And more than half of them really do relate to OCP updates and possibly zoning. And we're going to get into them in more detail. But first, I just want to recap again how we're currently planning. Next slide. And to note that it's a very fragmented approach that we're currently haven't undertaken. It's slow to advance, isn't it, Christine? So we've got 10, soon to be 11 OCPs and 6 zoning bylaws. So really fragmented approach. At the last presentation, I walked through why that's problematic. I think the main point to note is just that there's limitations to when we do the work that way, there's multiplication of the same thing, and it can be really time intensive. How have we done things differently over the last number of years? Next slide is another thing to remind ourselves of what's been working. And next slide. One thing is the thinking regionally approach. And the example I cite here would be what the work we did in 2020 when we did an update to the housing needs assessment and how we digested that data in a way that was meaningful for our use, meaning we had an overall assessment, but we also broke it up some regionally because you understand that there's influences from the way that the settlement pattern exists and the markets that play out in each of those regions may be unique. Next way we've done things, I think, successfully is thinking regionally, and I cite the Kootenai DPA project as one such example, where we look at a systems-based approach, recognizing that the lake has unique characteristics across the lake, but they are not unique across electoral areas. The only thing unique there is perhaps the people that live in those different regions, but if we're focused on the lake, then that's what should be the focus of the project, and therefore thinking from a systems-based approach, what's best for the lake. Before proceeding to the recommendations, just a recap on the land use tools available. Next slide. So under the hierarchy of plans, just a reminder that at the regional growth strategy would be that highest order of plans that we don't currently use in the RDCK, but is one that's available to us under the Local Government Act. And I'll go into a bit more detail on that one. Official community plans, which we have, of course, local area plans, and then the implementation through zoning. Next slide. Just a recap from what I shared in July, which is how the pieces work together. And we've used a bit of a metaphor of a house. So beginning with that highest order, the regional growth strategy is one that promotes human settlement, that makes efficient use of public facilities and services, land and other resources. And some regions will use that to address critical emerging issues, such as water supply. And the who is a really important piece here too. We've not done this, but other regions have done this because it involves the munis. It involves First Nations. It involves improvement districts. So other agencies that can work together to understand what's important in the region as a whole. Next slide. The official community plans are that vision for an area, and associated goals, objectives, policies, and of course development permits live in official community plans. Note that we have one for each electoral area currently, but we don't have to. Other regions have done this differently. At the workshop, we shared the example of Cowichan Valley Regional District, which is going through a process to harmonize their multiple OCPs into one, and then use the local area plans for those specific areas. So next slide. That local area plans, they can be done, they provide a bit greater detail on growth management in the communities expected to experience change. So from the graphic, you can see they're maybe more focused on those areas proximate to more densely populated areas. And they cover they recognize community-specific values and needs. And lastly, just a recap on the implementation available to us. Next slide is the zoning. Development permit areas, zoning, and those other bylaws like subdivision, floodplain, and various others that implement then the policy direction and the desire for those communities that they affect. So next slide, how can we improve our approach to land use planning? I've cited two words or descriptors for what I think would work better given the success we've had with it through those other examples I just shared. So that thinking regionally and that systems thinking. And I want to highlight then some factors that are really aligning with this way of doing things. Next slide would be the strategic priorities, and noting specifically regional approach to the growth, managing our assets and service delivery in a fiscally responsible manner, and energy efficiency and environmental responsibility. I've broken those out in the staff report, and you'll see why those are particularly relevant to how we approach land use planning in our opinion. Next slide. The other thing that's sort of aligning with this approach would be some of the funding that we've gotten from the province, and the project like this one, which is underway already, the regional growth planning analysis, which is really a data collection and planning analysis that would identify areas to focus growth in the region that are socially, economically, and environmentally sustainable for generations to come. That work is underway, as you know, and could lead to either a regional growth strategy, or we could still use that even if we remain in the status quo of doing official community plans and don't pursue a regional growth strategy. But next slide, Christine. Regional growth strategy is another thing that we do have funding for from the province, enough to get started. And that is work that, as noted, we could be doing in collaboration with the member municipalities and Indigenous nations. And we've got until the March of 2029 to begin using that money. And it could include creating a region-wide understanding of growth and how and where it should occur, and also developing a shared regional vision and goals to guide service delivery. So that's why we believe that's really important and key to this discussion. Next slide. I just want to land on a recommendation, as I noted in the staff report, that we believe that we cannot afford to continue with the status quo of maintaining land use planning policies and regulations specific to each electoral area. We're persuaded that this practice is an inefficient use of scarce resources both today and in the future. The status quo also ensures an ongoing disconnect between those resulting land use planning policies and regulations and the current needs of our residents. So with that, regardless of the direction we go, we acknowledge that more time is needed for really good discussion to involve everybody. And also, if there's desire for us to research anything from a staff level prior to the workshop, we could do that. So that's why, regardless of the path or direction we choose on a status quo versus a harmonized or regional growth strategy approach, a workshop would probably be best to explore that, because you may not have time today to get into all those details. However, that's the project list that remains, and beyond pulling out those near-term ones that are already underway. So I think I'll leave it there, answer any questions with any of the materials that we've provided, our recommendation, and also explore any needs you have that we could be researching in anticipation of a workshop if that's desired. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Nelson. So, I see Director Cunningham's and Director Davidoff, Director Vandenberg. I will introduce, because one of our committee members who cannot be here today, I did note at the outset, Director Newell can't be here because of somebody ongoing surgery stuff he's had, and Director Watson must be attending the family issue. She's back. She did make a suggestion. I'm just going to put it out there, and I can move it as a recommendation. When she looked at the list that, area IOCP, treatment planning procedures and fees bylaw review, her thoughts were that active transportation maybe does not have to be the front and center, one of the front and center priorities, and the local government housing initiatives may not need to be one of the front and center initiatives under that first list. So just putting it out there, that's something she had expressed by email, and she's not able to speak herself, and I have my own opinions on that, and I'm going to hold them until we go through around the table. So what I see is Cunningham, Davidoff, Vandenberg, Hanegraaff, Popoff. Just let me finish going around. Probably everybody, but and Director Davidoff, if you can put your hand down, it's showing up in two spots there, but noted. Okay, so that's where we'll start. We'll go Cunningham, Davidoff, Vandenberg, Hanegraaff, Popoff.
Thank you.
And Graham. Okay, well, this is what I couldn't see, because that the one pop-up on the screen was masking the other. Director Cunningham, please go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, to the chair, the staff. I have two. The first one, I guess, the most important. I like the idea of another workshop concentrating on the things mentioned. But my direct question is with regards to the $300,000. Do we have the funds in the bank now, and we can have them? Or because after all, we are looking at a provincial election, which may absolutely rock the boat, so to speak. And that's the second part of that first question or second question. What about a government change, and how will those kinds of things happen? Because I see that other parties, and we don't know how the election is going to turn out, but if we have a change in government, I am sure that we will certainly see a way in which they talk about things like reducing, the red tape, doing this, doing that, and all the next stuff, which really means that we may have to change our priorities all of a sudden because of the way they're operating. And I'd like to just have comments with that. First of all, the $300,000 is it in the bank, where if the new party say, sorry, you're not getting the rest of it. You don't spend it right away.
We've got it already.
Thank you. That makes me happy. And the second
It's good to know. Good question.
So there's actually, I was just going to point out too that there's really the three. We've been really grateful, I think, for the support from the province in three manners. I guess one was those provincial housing changes. With that came an amount 250. Yeah. 270. And then, of course, we had these other two pots that came. So the one that we're currently actioning for that data collection and analysis on regional growth, which we have, that's the 300. And so that's what you're asking about too,
Yes,
right?
but I wanted to make sure the money was in the bank in case of the change in government.
Yeah, and then that other amount, the 250,000 for the regional growth study itself or strategy that we have as well.
Perfect, that's what I wanted to know. And secondly, your concerns, or my concerns with regards to a change in government and how that may change our plan.
You know, the worst case scenario is that they revert back, and all those changes that you brought forward on housing, they try to repeal. I doubt that, but again, I'm no prognosticator in terms of what the province might do, but those are things that we have had to field as the winds change at the provincial level and how that impacts our regulations. So that's definitely a concern. We'll just hope for the best.
Thank you. Director Davidoff, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Nelson, for spelling out exactly what our funding is. And my question is around what we can use that funding for. The area IOCP started in 2016, and I don't see it actually getting done until probably 2025, the way it's going, which is a incredibly long haul. So, and I know the goal is to get them done in 2 years. Now, when we had the Cowichan Valley folks present, and they talked about their regional model, they did say they made one mistake. And the mistake is that they didn't do zoning at the same time as developing their overarching regional policy documents and finding all the places where they align. Now, all our OCP will do is set out the overarching policy that is not done yet. It's got to go to public hearing process. And then we have to go through all the rezoning process to make sure the zoning matches our policy statements. So I would say we're halfway done, and it's been it'll be 9 years. And this was one of my number one goals when I got elected. So the key thing is that obviously our system's broken. Could we use this money to develop for regional use a shopping cart approach of policy statements, zoning, the type of zonings, and then when we sit down and look at our OCPs, be it one area or a sub-region, we have a combined list. We have this shop. Well, here we go. Here are your options if you've got ag land, rural land. Here's commercial. Here's all your policy statement options. Here's your zoning that would go along with that. And then when we start doing our work as our APHC, for example, working with staff, we'd say, yeah, we really would like to, look at this, and this, instead of developing everything from scratch from day one. And that would help every OCP, would respect our autonomy as rural areas, not force us to. I cannot imagine what would happen, actually I can imagine, because we've been doing some work, if we start taking, a holistic, full-on rural area, electoral area approach, and we've talked about this, or a sub-regional approach. So, but some tools that the whole region would have within the RDCK to utilize as a menu of options so that we don't have to do things from scratch. So is it possible to use part of this $300,000 to develop that menu, those choices? I mean, on those items that I raised?
Nelson, sure.
Thank you, Chair. There's a lot of ground covered there. So I don't know if I'm going to get to every point, but I'm going to start back with the one comment about Cowichan Valley. I don't recall that.
Oh, yeah, it happened. I know. I heard it.
Yeah, I'm not disputing that it was there. I just don't recall it. What I understand from their process is that they were going through a harmonized OCP and modernizing that OCP, and subsequent to that, their zoning bylaws.
No.
And so that work is underway. If you go to their website, you can see some of that progression there. And that's
Well, hold on. I don't like this idea of jumping in and out and having a debate like this. For the workshop, which I'm sure we're going to have, I'd like to see that point clarified.
Yeah.
And I got notes, other people have notes. Let's hold that for a workshop to see whether somebody thought there was a better way to do it. So on the other points, please go ahead, Nelson.
And so I see us taking a similar approach. And as I walk through that hierarchy of plans, certainly the OCP is what comes first. Subsequent to that, the zoning bylaw is how it gets implemented. And we would foresee that in all of our areas. But you have pointed out the challenge when we have multiple OCPs and zoning bylaws of how quickly we can get to them. But that's the ultimate end goal, certainly. To the point of the funding, the 300 grand is specific to that analysis, that data collection and analysis on regional growth. However, those other pots, the 250 for the regional growth strategy, can be used for certain, all those elements. I can share with you the letter we got from the province. It gives us a fair amount of latitude, to be honest. And so I hope that answers all the points of your question.
Chair, supplemental, if I may.
Go ahead. Yep.
Yes. And again, I'm not going to debate what Cowichan said the mistake they made. We'll talk about that at the workshop. But the key thing is that I would like to see that we utilize some of this money to create efficiencies and huge cost savings so that an OCP process can happen in 2 years and not in 9 years, which is just ridiculous. And the key thing is, yes, we've had staffing changes. Yes, we changed the way we did them. In 1996, when we did our last OCP process, we did the policy statements and the zoning at the same time. And it didn't take us 9 years. So the bottom line is that we have to find those efficiencies. I'm glad to hear there's money to assist us with this process, because somehow we've created inefficiency, but we sure as heck can do better. So I would really like to see staff explore and present at the workshop how we can use a menu of policy statements and zoning that matches those statements so that we have the tools that we need to populate our OCPs, and it can be done very quickly if you have that menu ready to go. So that's—
Thank you, Director.
I'll stop there.
Great.
Thank you.
And Sangeeta had a few more thoughts along that line before we move down the list. Please go ahead, Sangeeta.
Yeah, respectfully, through the chair to Director Davidoff. Two things. Your OCP did not start from scratch. It's built on the existing OCP. We also had a pandemic in that period where part of the OCP process is engagement with the public. I think one of the things that I'll talk to the team about is at the workshop, we talk about our methodology on how we evaluate the information that we have available to us to inform an official community plan and basically look at how the community has grown since then. But I just wanted to clarify those 2 points with Director Davidoff.
Thank you. And yeah, workshop is going to be the best place for some of this. I'm going to scramble to steal a charger from my computer because I didn't bring mine in. Well, Director Vandenberg, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, through the chair. Thank you guys for the work that you're doing on this. clarity question. In your executive summary, you've noted the number of items. I believe you said those are not necessarily your priorities, they're just a list of things, correct? Because that's important to me because the active transportation feasibility study, I do not see, if that was a priority list, I would agree with Amy that that ought to get moved down. That said, workshop, yes. I think that's the appropriate place to have this conversation because I think there's an opportunity to explore a lot more possibilities. I'm in favor of harmonizing the OCP and modernizing. You know, I think in terms of timelines and resources and overall cost to taxpayers, harmonized approach is the way to go. What kind of concerns me is in terms of the timeline is to Director Davidoff's point, it ought to be sooner than later. Yes, you have a 22-year projection as to how to maintain those that future OCP, those OCPs, and in the harmonized effect. But I think there's an opportunity to really dig the heels in, or get yours in the water and move this along on a quicker period of time for harmonizing and modernizing. I guess the only other thing I wonder about is in your chart, your flow chart, your matrix, you talk about harmonizing OCP, and then you go down to local area structure plan. Where I come from, we had an area structure plan, and then our unique communities had a local area structure plan, which I think is what Amy speaks to a lot about with the challenges in her area, is the uniqueness from one area to the other, which is covered off in what I'm familiar with the local area structure plan, but I don't see the area structure plan, which would be like B and C. We're so similar. Really, we could be working on the same type of an OCP, an area structure plan. And that would be easy. It's just cut and paste, put together, and Roger needs to agree that his boundary is my boundary, I think is that easy. I promise simplifying it. And I don't mean to suggest that it's that easy. So yeah, it's just to prioritize workshop. Harmonization and modernization of OCPs. My concern is the timeline. And the reason for supporting is the resources component and the overall cost and benefit to our taxpayers. Thank you.
Director Nelson, did you?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've
on that?
speak to a couple of points. The first one, beginning with the executive summary, that's a list of the near-term projects. So those are ones that are near completion or we're well into or just beginning. And the one that is not there in the presentation I just provided is the active transportation feasibility study, Castlegar and Nelson, because that one's now complete. You will see a presentation on the board meeting tomorrow, I believe, on that one. The report was presented last month. So that's why it's down from 8 to 7 near-term projects we're actively working on. To the point on oars in the water, doing it faster, agree 100%. And that's why in the costing that we did, showing what we could be accomplishing, is maybe it's a bit optimistic, but that's assuming funding for consultants to lead that project. And that's why we've guessed at what it could be based on our conversations with other local governments. And that's why that figure is a consultant component as well as a staff component. And that's, I think, the way that we can achieve things faster. One just quick side note on that is recognizing when we are doing everything in-house, the demands that can come on our plate without, we didn't really anticipate, like wildfire, and that consuming staff time for months at a time where they're not able to then work on these projects. Another would be changes in provincial policy. Dana worked tirelessly to complete those small changes in like 6 months. It was a miracle that she did. But again, that takes away then from other work she's doing. And so those things that we can't really anticipate do impact our work. And that's why additional resourcing through consultings can help us get there faster.
Thanks. Going to Director Hanegraaff next.
Yeah,
I agree with everyone else that we should have a workshop. I feel a bit like, when you're in the ferry lineup and you're right at the lineup and then the ferry leaves without you. That's how I feel. But maybe we need a bridge, right? What we're doing isn't working. I've got the oldest OCP, like the least up to date. I don't even want to talk about what I was doing when it was last updated because I can't even remember. But I'm not going to argue to get that last spot on ferry. I'm going to say that we need to change how we're doing things. To continue the way we are just holds everyone back. And it's just not helpful. So I think, yes, a workshop. Let's figure this out. There has got to be a better way. And, the planning department have so many other things they could be doing than this. And so in the interest of moving forward, being more efficient and serving our residents better than we are, I think we need to change how we do it. And whatever that looks like, there has to be a simpler way because this isn't working.
Thanks. Director Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I agree with everything that's been said so far, but just a couple of questions here. Like when we talked about harmonizing, my visual is a template of an OCP for all rural areas and the commonalities that we have. And then as part of that, the differences that we have will be specific to each area or subregion, et cetera. And one thing that I've noticed in there, you had contractor mentioned or contracting some of the work out. Well, that, my concern is about the contractor and the local knowledge of the area of a contractor. So that'd be a question to the chair, to Nelson.
Who's available?
Like what is the intent of the contractor? Because you can bring a contractor in from Edmonton that doesn't know the area at all, but good in planning and zoning, etc. So what is the intent of the contractor? Are we looking at local hire? Are we looking at people that are familiar with different areas? Like the Creston area is different than Area D or the Slocan Valley.
I guess Chair Jackman, the way I'd respond to that question from Director Papa is we can do it in-house and not hire consultants. It just would then be much more time intensive and we wouldn't get there as quickly. Bringing in consultants is pretty much a necessity, I think, when it comes to doing things quickly. And the way we address that concern around local knowledge is you and our residents and the engagement strategy that we undertake. But we can't expect there to be enough planning consultants within the RDCK to do the work. And they also maybe lack the expertise and perhaps depth that some of these other firms bring that are working in these other locales. They're used to doing work. Stephanie, she left the room. You could talk to her about her experience working with urban systems and working in small communities, because there's an example of a firm that does work all across the province, and there's others, and they do inform the work they're doing through a rigorous engagement with the public to better understand what those values are. What they're bringing is their professional expertise, which is universal, and it doesn't need, and so that's where they're getting the components they need to do good work. The last piece I'll say, in hiring our consultants, we have a rigorous process to go through in scoring them, and that would certainly be one of them, that suitability. Do they have the skills? Do they have also the ability to understand what those local interests are, and have they constructed their response to our call in a way that addresses that?
Supplement it by means. Will that actually take some of our staff time to bring them up to speed?
I would say to that question, yes, that's a component of any project we undertake. Do you remember when we did, I think one good example of that was the housing needs assessment when we brought in Macola. And they insisted on coming to the community and being here in person to meet you and to meet the residents and to meet those people in that housing field doing work across the region. And so that's an example of what we would expect to see is how are they connecting to those local interests to better understand what they are. And we, of course, as staff supporting those projects, convey our knowledge of what we know of the area as well.
One last question is, we talked about a workshop, and it was mentioned a rural workshop first and then a combined workshop with local governments. Is that the process we intend to use?
I think what staff wants today, some reassurance are on the right path, and then the other workshop, I think we'll end up throwing it to staff, how they want to layer it, what steps we should take, all of us, some of us, is it a board exercise, is it a rural exercise? But
yeah, thank you, Chair. I think we could reflect on that and take what you tell us today in terms of your preference. If that's something you really think is important, let's note that, and we'll come back and we'd probably be checking in with the rural directors on whatever approach we take to say, do you think this will work? So there will be some back and forth of just how we approach the work. But I think, first of all, is this worthwhile? And therefore give it to us with your direction, and we'll start crafting an exercise that we think responds to your needs.
Yeah, I thank you. Like a rural workshop by itself is something possibly that we could start with, but we have to bring in local government, the municipalities in, because I'm looking at my specific area. I've got 3 municipalities, whatever I do in my area will impact the municipalities, whatever they do in their area will impact the rural area.
yeah, quite clearly, we can't continue pretending we're different. We never have been. We're all pretty rural. So just to recap, so people know where we're at, I have on the speakers list still Director Graham, Weatherhead, Director Nain has signaled to speak. I have a couple of thoughts that probably keep shifting. You guys are talking. I don't know if there'd be anybody else in between, but Director Graham, please go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you to the staff for the work that's been done here. And I will say that one of the challenges I have really had with the work plan at the regional district is how does one ascertain priorities? And so I like this in theory. I guess one of the questions I would have is, I wasn't around in 2018 when the campground review was being asked for, but I noticed it's still last on the list. So I'm just wondering, it's been there for 6 years. So I guess one of our priorities is not dealing with our oldest issues. So that's just kind of my first thing. There's a lot here. So all I can say is there's a Greater Housing Study, or Greater Nelson Housing Study, a housing needs assessment, a housing development costing study, a local government housing initiative. There's, I was glad to hear the active transportation feasibility study is done, because that was my understanding that it was done. Then there's the complete communities assessment. Is that the same as a housing strategy? I guess what I'm saying is I'm losing track of all of the items on the work plan, and like how Nelson was saying, one has to be before the other. But I'm wondering now if we're doing this right, since now we have got a plan underway that's going to tell us where we should be doing this. So should we have that study done before we are doing some of this other work? And then I understand that some of it's mandated by the province. So I guess I am saying that I am confused with the work plan. But I do like that staff is coming forward in theory and asking for some prioritization. I'm looking for clarification that this would go until the end of 2025. That's the list that we're looking at. And the workshop, I am completely okay with another workshop, but I would like to see the focus being more on a regional, sub-regional, instead of a whole harmonization approach. And that's because in Area E have not even been able to come to agreement, or the residents here have not even been able to come to agreement on even having an OCP. We only have a partial OCP. So harmonization would be a very strong challenge. I have already heard from Area E residents that say that would be a loss of our local autonomy. I'm quite certain that there will be a strong public opposition. And so I would say I am very reluctant to think that that's going to work for my area. I have actually written a report and I can send that to you, Nelson, sort of with some of the feedback that I have already gotten from some of my vocal residents, and they have 12 reasons why harmonization should be opposed. So just want to make everybody aware sort of what I'm dealing with in Area E and why I would support, I'm hearing some of the areas they want harmonization and they're very similar, and I have challenges in my own area where we're not similar, even within our own area. Blewett is very different from, the area like Balfour and Harrop and Proctor. So it's just going to be a challenge. And I'm quite certain with my diverse community identities and my varied economic conditions and my infrastructure differences, that this is going to be a very big challenge. And while I don't want to stymie anyone else, if they think it's a good idea for their areas, then I would say yes. But for Area E, I can't, I'm really struggling here. And even a workshop, I don't know, because like I say, we haven't even gotten an OCP for the whole area. So that's part of my challenges, and I've gone on long enough.
Nelson, did you have any points to?
Yeah, I'll start at the beginning. The campground bylaw item, so that's on the remaining projects list. Its placement in number 10 isn't necessarily its importance necessarily. It predates my time here. It was initiated by staff, I believe, and I don't know that there was direction from the board specifically on that one. So that one, we might want to discuss if there's even value in keeping it or not, and that's something we could explore in the workshop. I guess I have a question for Director Graham around the values in the workshop. Oh, sorry, before I get there, another point of clarification. It is confusing. I find it confusing. It helped me writing this report because I could get it straight. For you guys, I appreciate how challenging that is, and a lot of the projects have similar names. So I just suggest going back to the staff report and reading through it, going back to the project list. If you have any questions, please follow up with me directly. I know the one where there's a bit of confusion is the regional growth planning analysis came from a Complete Communities grant. So we have used that wording maybe at the beginning, and now we're calling it the Regional Growth Planning Analysis Project. So that's the one that's underway, that's going to collect data and analyze opportunities for growth and how we should be doing that. And it would inform subsequent policy work, be it a regional growth strategy or official community plan updates. So again, appreciate that it's really complex, and I would just offer any assistance, follow up with me directly. And I'm interested in also the document that you spoke to, so please share it with me and we can talk more.
And you had a question back to Director?
And the question, I guess, was on the workshop. What would help it be a success for you? Recognizing if you don't think harmonization is a focus, maybe what would be a focus that would be helpful for you? Is it the prioritization piece or what? Thank you.
Thank you, Nelson. And through the chair, yes, I have struggled with this work plan. I've done analysis on it, and I think we've all struggled with how does one ascertain priorities? And I think it's just been left to the staff. I think the board says, here's our direction, yes, we want you to do this. And then it's left to the staff to figure out, which one to do first or which one to do at the same time. So that is just a challenge that I have seen all along. And I think that challenge has been here since the beginning of time. So I really do appreciate that you are bringing this forward and you're saying hey, these are the ones we do want to work with. And a workshop to me would definitely, if we could understand what these all are, how they work together, And are we doing it in the right order? And how, I don't even know how that's possible when you're working away and now all of a sudden the province drops a bomb on you that you have to now do this and drop everything else, or a wildfire comes and you do that. But still, at the end of the day, when you're running a business, you know, we do set our priorities. We do work on them in priority basis. Yes, other things happen, but then we go back to our priority. And that's kind of just been a challenge for me. And so that would be a check mark in the right side of the column. And also, I think that there is a real possibility for a sub-regional harmonized OCP, because there are areas that have so much in common. I'm just an area that has a huge challenge with planning. And I don't know, am I the only, a question to staff, if I'm allowed to ask, am I the only area that doesn't have an OCP at all in part of my area? Or does everybody else have an OCP?
So again, maybe we'll just go in order of the points raised. And Chair Jackman, you might want to chime in on how we do the prioritization and have in the past. But my understanding, it's not directed by staff, but rather by the board. And we've done them in sequence. And where things are dropped in our lap, we come to the board to clarify, recognizing this is a priority. Do you support us working on that? And in which case, some of those items previously directed might have to take a back seat until that more urgent work is addressed. And you might want to speak to that more when we're done. And then the other thing, oh shoot, no, I forgot what it was. Sorry, I'll let you go, Chair Jackman, on the prioritization piece, just to note that it's not staff directed, but board directed.
Agreed. We have directed lots of things, including the campground issue. And there's a whole reason for that, because these campgrounds that became year-round rental locations have sprung up all over the place. There's more of them than you may want to count, just thinking about how much work it is. I think we have had a high degree of randomness in the past period. That's my best assessment. One of the triggers I recall was a petition in Boswell saying, hey, we got orderly zoning here, and we got kind of a loose OCP there, and let's get, knuckle down and do something. And randomly, we kind of picked up areas A, B, and C all the same time. No real rationalization. And then we randomly split it up, not randomly. It was a political decision to split those up. And I will never fully understand the trigger behind that. I think I have a sense of some of it from one of the previous directors out of either area B or C, won't say which one. We've been random. That's the answer. Let's be organized, methodical, systematic, efficient. We've been very random. But anyway, you had some other points.
Oh, just the other thing is to Director Graham's question on OCPs. You might recall, just go back to the materials that we provided for the workshop. There was a map that we created that showed where OCPs apply and where they don't. Because some areas, their OCP covers partially all of the electoral area, but not all of it. And yeah, some aren't covered. Like Area H North, for instance, stops at Slocan, and so you've got Slocan Valley down to Playmore Junction has an OCP. There's an example. So yeah, it varies, and that's why the map might be helpful to understand just where we have OCPs, where we don't. Same with the zoning, where we have zoning bylaws and where we don't. There's a map as well on the workshop materials page.
Okay, thank you. So I have Weatherhead, myself, Maine, Lockwood, and for a second time Vandenberg right now, and David off for a second time. And this is good discussion and kind of, to me, going in a direction that maybe we'll be able to pull together. I'm going to speak for the second time, so I'm going to speak before the municipal directors. Take a little privilege there, because I'm worried our conversation is going to get stretched from points that I want to see where I align. But let's go to Director Weatherhead and myself. Please go ahead.
Thank you through the chair. This is a really great discussion. I appreciate it. And I think I can take some of my questions offline with you. But I think it's kind of a moot point in consulting costs, because if we were to take what it would cost staff to do this, I feel like the figure would be even bigger, but it would be stretched over a longer period of time. So am I correct in that sort of way of looking at it? I appreciated this cost sheet.
Chair, Director Weatherhead's point, what I would say is, whatever you do, be consistent. So to weigh apples and apples if you do a harmonized approach with consultants measured against a status quo approach with consultants and vice versa. And we use the option of hiring consultants, assuming that the same conditions apply. We would just use consultants if we did it in a status quo manner as well. And the point being that it's perhaps less efficient, or you're certainly not going to get to the end goal very quickly. And that's, I guess, the main point to identify with that comparison. And then the other point is just on an ongoing basis, updating them and keeping them current is the challenge when you have so many of them versus one. And so that's the point of exploring this notion of what might work well for us from an efficiency standpoint, recognizing the challenges we have today.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in with a few thoughts. One, I just want to nail down a little bit because I did, as I read off earlier, what Chair Watson wanted to express her concerns. Well, the active transportation, that's at a complete and whole stage right now. There's a huge amount of money required for identified, so I can see that's going to maybe sit on the side for a while. The local government housing initiative, though, that was questioned by Director Watson, but I thought we had to, under the current rules or expectations of the province, we were mandated to make those changes to the OCP amendments on densities and uses by December 2025. We still have more work to do that we have not yet completed.
That's correct, Chair. The first part was what Dana did with the small scale multi-unit housing part. The province wanted the zoning changes made immediately and gave latitude to local governments to then come back and amend their OCPs to be consistent with that. So that's why they flipped the order. You would normally do the OCPs first and then zoning bylaws, but they want to prioritize getting the regs changed quicker. So yes, the subsequent part of that will be updates to OCPs everywhere to make sure there's consistency with the smart changes that Dana brought to you.
So barring political interference or flipping, we'll call it that. That's there. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about trigger words, and I'm appreciating the words Director Davidoff is bringing to the table here today, and I also want to maybe address part of Director Graham's concerns. At the Crescent Valley Fall Fair, I had two great conversations, and certain trigger words came up. Harmonization was one of them. Like, okay, I see that being blended with the provincial election. I'd like us all to just ignore concerns over that. You might think it's important that people are worried about harmonization, being put in a box. Next thing you know, you're in a 15-minute city. That is out of my mind. We'll call this whatever we choose to call it as we work through a process. If it's a trigger word that offends somebody today, to me, and I'm on air here, that is too bad. We have a process to follow. Get over what word we use. Understand the process. We need to be a little more efficient than we have. So I like Director Davidoff's words. You know, whether it's a shopping cart or menu, my words, maybe they were too convoluted. We're more wanting a professionalized language. Certain things we do shouldn't come or spring from the words of a community group that says, we want to be known and identified as this because we're different. Guess what? You are less different than you think you are. Everybody has diverse communities. Let's all go for tours in each other's electoral areas. We'll see the same kind of smeared across the landscape variation between this community, that cluster, whatever, and everybody's unique. I've gotten over that years ago, several terms ago. What we have is a need to make sure that professionals, planning staff who know what they're doing, use the right words so that we're not falling over ourselves later with maybe some legal issue or something being challenged. And more, I want to see our professionals craft the words that belong in certain, under the Local Government Act required documents. They craft the words that we know can't be challenged legally, are fairly clear language, and anybody can understand without putting on your glasses and saying, oh, I'm a different person than you are, and I have to see things differently. There's a few basic words and definitions that I just want to see professionals do. And this is what's maybe brought me into the buying into the sort of Qualicum approach. Yeah, we can have lots of little local area conversations. And this is what really struck me, talking to a retired 35-year career political pundit who worked in Victoria, who's now a beekeeper up in Window Lakeview. Some of you guys know him. He said, oh, well, we can't harmonize stuff. What about this? And I said, well, okay. First off, we think we can create a OCP that's meaningful. But I said, what Wendell wants to talk about is pretty different from what Greg Creek wants to talk about. And having all in one thing and done all at once in one big exercise, as Director David points out, might take 9 years, 5 years, 2 years, whatever. But maybe we need a structure where Wendell, when it needs, can have a local area plan conversation independent of the concept that the whole OCP has to be amended at that time. That would then be a package of information to draw up into the OCP as it rolls through a cycle. The OCP having fairly professionally drafted, consistent, sensible, understandable language, and this component of what this area wants. And the reason I pick out Wendell is I've gone through twice where they wanted to become their own municipality and incorporate. What an interesting conversation. They want to incorporate, but they don't want to reduce their 5-acre lots to smaller lots, so they can't afford the roads and or the sewage by increasing their tax base. And they can't densify without the sewage system because they have a high water table and failing septic. Really interesting conversation if you want to go down that path. But it's a Wendell conversation. And if we can create a regional growth strategy with this oversight and some kind of enforceable zoning documentation and some kind of sensible language in the OCPs that's not going to get us in court or challenged. And then within that, area plans where these really intense conversations can be held when they're ready. Because I'll tell you right now, 90% of area is not ready for a new conversation, but a couple areas might be Riendell, and eventually it'll be Wendell again, be next. So I like the approach, and I don't care if harmonization, shopping cart, whatever. I'm not planning to put anybody in a box. I'm just planning to be more efficient. So A, B, and C were combined once, we're split. And the failure politically we had is we didn't encourage timing to fringe plan with Creston. We missed twice, like coming and going. So this is where the regional approach has to be taken as well. I should just quit there because I've got pages of other notes. Appreciate you listening to me for a little bit. So we do have still our welcome guest. We have Director's name, Lockwood and Page. I welcome your input in that order, and then we'll go back to it for the second time. Director Ming, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much, Chair and Rural Affairs Committee, for allowing me to sit in on your meetings and giving me this opportunity to provide just a few thoughts on the matter before you right now. I really do like what I'm hearing in the discussion, and it definitely points to the fact that you both need and desire a workshop to thresh these things out further and to find ways of satisfying your individual needs within a framework of how are we similar and where do we need to accommodate differences. My main point, however, is that at some point the municipalities are going to have to be not just consulted, but involved in some discussion about this. The housing piece, particularly the housing piece, the floodplain and hazard mapping, and the regional growth strategy. The challenges for housing in rural areas are different than they are in municipalities. However, there's a strong likelihood that areas where housing could be developed are in the fringes right around municipalities. So you've got all of a sudden, you've got rural and municipal that have to work together on that because it will have impacts for both of them. Floodplains and hazard mapping, Silcan, Silverton, New Denver, Caslow, and probably every municipality in the regional district have creeks and rivers running through the middle of our municipalities. How can you do floodplain and hazard mapping without involving the more dense jurisdictions that are being involved about this? And regional growth, it's just, I hardly feel I even need to mention it, that regional growth will happen when everybody is working together. There are going to be some challenges that rural wants something that the municipality doesn't want to see on their outskirts and vice versa, but we will have to be working together. I would hope to see a workshop with the rural directors to, as I mentioned before, to thresh out some of the things that you're trying to wrestle with today, and then a workshop that also includes the municipalities before final decisions have been made. So that's my input there. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thanks, Director. Go to Director Lockwood and Paige. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I wasn't going to, but there's a lot of information that has come forward. And I'm glad that you brought up about the trigger words, because that is in our society now, is there are some certain trigger words. So when we talk about harmonizing, and I know that when Salmo, it took us 5 years just to do our OCP for a small 2.5 kilometers by 2.5 kilometers. And when we finally did it, we didn't do our zoning. So we still don't have zoning that matches our OCP. Now, I know regional districts or electoral areas are different than municipalities. We can't have one without the other. I don't know if that's changed at the provincial level, that they're mandating regional or electoral areas to have OCPs.
To Nelson, that was hinted in one of the bills, wasn't it? Not 44, but I thought that was hinted, a 5-year cycle.
I'll get back to you after reading one. I'm not aware of that one.
Oh, because what's interesting that when I listen to this is it doesn't matter if you have 20 communities or if you have 4 communities in your area, and you only have 2 OCPs. It's a vision of the people that took it, and when they're 28 years old, a lot of those people that were involved in that vision at that time don't have that same vision now, because they're not there or they've moved on and there's new people. So some of the words, like having a common context, might help when you're developing an OCP. And when this is what I'm hearing, is when the provincial government says that we must have this done by December 31st of 2025, and it's September 11th of 2024. I don't know how you're ever going to get 11 OCPs up to date for all these areas without having common areas. So my question to staff would be, is having a common context of an OCP that does not break down different areas, would it be allowable by the province to be able to start with that, to be able to start that every single electoral area has a common OCP? So you have to have the introduction, what is an OCP? Right? You have to have natural environment stuff. You have to have boat parks. You have to have that kind of stuff in an OCP. It doesn't have to totally be that we're going to do this with this parcel of land. Would they allow that to be a starting point? So after that, each community can build on that trigger word of harmonizing. That common context. Is there, I don't believe that you're going to be able to answer this right now, but it's something that we should be looking at.
Chair Jackson, the first point was on the updating. How can we possibly update 11 by the end of 2025? I guess the short answer is these are not whole-scale updates of OCPs. They are components of the OCPs to address the zoning changes we make in advance to ensure there's consistency. So and in a lot of cases, they're probably going to be quite minor. So I do think it's achievable. What it sounds like what you're describing is what we're proposing. Because if you look at, and again, the documents, there was a lot that we applied to the staff, but one of them was the policy alignment piece. We took one example, which is ag policy. We looked at it across all OCPs and we observed that there's huge commonality, and we would probably find that in a lot of other policies. And so our expectation is we could combine them all, those common elements, into a single OCP. We would address the uniqueness of electoral areas. through the use of local area plans. And again, this is one example. I don't know if it's the best example, but it's what Cowichan Valley did, and it makes sense to me how it stays. It's one of the things we could explore to address the uniqueness of those electoral areas.
Further?
Oh, there's a lot, this is a huge conversation.
Fair enough. So, Director Page, then we have a few for the second time comments, and we may have either ratification of a somewhat modified list, but we'll see where that goes, and then maybe we'll get into a conversation about when we will see an outline for a workshop or 2 workshops perhaps. So, Director Page, for you.
Thank you, Chair Jackman. I've spoken to this issue in the past, specifically around regional growth strategies, but I don't have too much more to add. I just would say this is, I feel, to be one of the bureaucratic challenges that doesn't get a lot of fanfare, gets the wrong kind of fanfare, but when we get on the other side of it, climbing up this hill, it's going to pay dividends in terms of a more effective and efficient organization that is clearer and easier to understand by both staff, the governing bodies, and the residents. There will be doomsday out there related to this. And as we've seen with other topics where there's a lot of passion, a lot of that comes along with an opportunity to educate and consult with and discuss with the public what these changes mean, what these benefits of a local plan are, what the benefits are of segregating out these policy pieces versus OCP pieces versus regional pieces, and how that cleans up the language and allows people to see what the organization is trying to accomplish. So it will be a slog, I anticipate, but I think it will result with better organization on the other side, and that's why we're all here, is to provide the best value to the residents of the regional district. And I believe this is one of those places that will pay dividends all throughout the organization long into the future. So I support making it a priority and doing a workshop.
Thanks. So, a little more conversation here, I guess. I've seen that. I didn't go back to check for a chat. I don't see anything else there right now. Well, I do. So, wanting to bring points up for the second time, Directors Vandenberg and Davidoff. Go ahead, Director Vandenberg.
Thank you through the chair, and thank you to Director Jackman to touch on those things that are completely relevant that you did allude to. I guess I'm a little bit concerned about sub-regional OCP. And no, you can have your cake and eat it too. You really can. I mean, your OCP essentially should be your baseline OCP for the RD, which is a policy alignment that Nelson referred to. Then you layer on your autonomy opportunities, which is your local area structure plan or your area structure plan. That's where your individuality shines through above and layered onto the baseline. So I just wanted to touch on that piece again. And then further to Director Graham, I too am sometimes lost in all these things that are going on. And yes, it's easy to say, we'll refer back to a number of reports. Well, you know, if I had lots of free time, there'd be a lot of things I would do. Referring back to a lot of these reports is time consuming and a rabbit hole-ish. However, in a previous lifetime, we would have our planning department is a huge department. They got lots of things going on. So, you know, occasionally a quarterly summary identifying those initiatives and activities that are being worked on is helpful to bring to top of mind where we're kind of going and where we could go to get that information. To Director Graham's point, that would be nice to refresh too. And because your group is so dynamic, working on so many different things, a quarterly reporting type of activity, which I do know that you do try to provide, but is that one-on-one with you?
Hi, Andy.
That would be really.
It's Chris.
Director David, can you please
I'll be there just after 12.
Conversation.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Yep.
If you can mute Director David off, thanks. Carry on, Director Vandenberg.
Yes, and I think Andy just forfeited his time with that. But no, I just wanted to to get that, that refreshment, because I understand the challenges that Director Graham is talking to, and I get the same thing too. And I sent notes saying, where is this stuff? And, maybe this is an opportunity to get us realigned at the right periods of time through quarterly reporting. That's it. Thank you.
Either Nelson or Sangeeta, we did have charts back a few years ago with a little bit more information, maybe a little more regularly about how many through your department as a whole, like building permit applications or this or that, sort of what's in stream.
Well, we have been doing that, but I did want to say, Chair Jackman,
can we add? Yeah,
like we have updates for our development applications.
Yeah.
On a regular basis. I like your suggestion on the sort of the long range planning work and regular updates might be helpful. So
the project element of it, as opposed to the application.
Yeah. Where is this one at? We are coming to you at certain milestones in those projects, but I'm hearing that you might want more frequent updates, and I think that's a great suggestion. The last thing I'd point to, I know you said there's a lot of reading, but what I said to Director Graham too is don't hesitate to call me anytime, because we'd be happy to provide those updates to you one-on-one if that's helpful too.
Okay, going back to Director Davidoff, floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, first of all, I got to apologize. And I'm just wondering, does anyone else need anything picked up? I'm free from 12 o'clock, hopefully, until 12:45.
I won't believe it until I actually see you here.
Okay, and so...
But that's not my comment. So,
yes,
Cheryl, you spoke of a report that you wrote, and I don't know how comfortable, through the chair, I don't know how comfortable you feel sharing that out. I would just like to see your items compared to the stuff that I have, and I'm just wondering, so is it shareable or not?
If it's okay if I answer through the chair, I was looking for it, Andy. I've got it in print and I couldn't find it on my computer. So I'm wondering if I've got it I've got 4 computers. So I couldn't find it but I'm happy to share it with you and to let you know, like loss of a local autonomy, public opposition, diverse community identities, varied economic conditions, environmental considerations, development goals, infrastructure differences, regulatory complexity, political challenges, resource allocation, flexibility issues, and bureaucratic hurdles are the items.
I got some stuff to add to that list. So when you find it, send it to me.
So you will do that offline and perhaps with staff, and we may see some of that maybe in a workshop. Thank you. So this is a good point to either give staff the reassurance on sort of the track they're on now. They had put forward some, recommendation to continue with these various items of work and further to schedule a second workshop. Well, as I understand it, and it said at the outset, what's on your agenda sheet will be ordered or numbered appropriately for tomorrow when it goes to the board, and that active transportation feasibility study comes off this, period.
If you wish, it doesn't matter either way.
Well, I'd rather not introduce confusion if we're saying that it's priority to do something you finish.
It was when I wrote the report in July, that was...
No, absolutely.
So if you wish to remove it and it's complete, do so, yeah.
Well, it's the committee's wish that I'm looking for, and whether we can come to recommendation on that and move it forward or not, we'll go to public time, but open to the committee. What are your wishes? I saw Director Hanegraaff. Do you want to move a recommendation?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll move the recommendation without the active transportation feasibility study.
So these are the prioritized projects in the near term. And what it says is second workshop with rural directors. Conversation will go beyond that, but that's just the first step, I think. Moved, seconded. Discussion, or we had quite a bit of discussion? Seeing none, all in favor. So there is a ratification is what I look at. It is what you're already doing. And some of it necessarily must do. Thank you for all the background and update. And I'm glad most of your team was able to be here to kind of go through just listen to the commentary. At 11:44 on here, and we have one business item. I'm going to take a stab at rural admin. There's a community works fund application. Nelson Cycling Club enhance the trails project at 9.1. Director Newell did email me directly saying, yes, absolutely, he is in support of this. It's areas E and F impacted by this application. Director Graham, would you want to move the recommendation?
Yes, I'd like to move the recommendation.
Okay, and second, I see a second, Director Popoff. Can I ask staff just to confirm, or Stuart, if he wants to chime in? I don't know how well he's doing. He said he came down with a bug. This is money that's been sitting in a service, just sitting there, nothing added, nothing taken, my understanding, for a substantial period of time. I don't know if anybody here that can confirm that. And this is just using this funding for a project. Director Graham, go ahead.
Thank you through the chair to the chair. This is a community works fund application. This is not that you're talking about the money in reserves in S207, and that is not what this is. This
I thought
is
that would
just,
be, oh, sorry, and that is being added, I thought, the S207. It's going to be combined.
I thought that was in board tomorrow, and all this was just the actual community works grant for the balance.
Okay, my mistake. The rest is on board. You're right. So that'll be a separate motion tomorrow. Thanks very much. So this is part of moving a project forward. Other than my misdirected question, any other questions, discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Tomorrow they have a top-up item for getting this project ahead. So that's carried. We'll go till tomorrow. This is 11:45, and there are quite a few people potentially from the public on the line, or a few anyway. So online observer, or I thought I saw Valley Voice, maybe they dropped off. Are there any questions for this committee from the public? Nobody's putting any in chat. I'll just ask again, any questions from the public? For the third and final time, because sometimes we're faulted for not letting people get a chance to unmute. So hearing none, we will move past that. That brings us to adjournment. Motion to adjourn. Okay, and without objection, we're adjourned. Thanks very much at 11:46.